officially live. We have a whole countdown too, so that's nice. Welcome everyone. We have been off for a few weeks, so bear with us here. We had some scheduling changes and everything of that nature, and so it's been we haven't had a chance to get caught up on everything. So welcome. This, of course, is Career Coaches on Call. If you are hearing us and listening in, please drop into the chat. Let us know where you're from, where you're listening from. And of course, we're going to be taking questions and would love to hear from you. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Charla first. And Charla, if you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you. And I was going to give you the topic. I realize as I jinxed myself because I said earlier, let's see if I can do this moderator thing. So tonight is going to be why you're not landing interviews. And so and we can get into, obviously we've had some, here in the US and I think other markets too, we've seen some not so great job news. And so, that obviously impacts a lot of people too. And I think we should probably maybe even address that a little bit tonight as well, because I know that can be discouraging, but there's other things too that we can be able to focus on. So, Charlotte, I'll pass the mic over to you, then we'll go to Alan, and then I'll introduce myself and we'll get started.
Thank you. I'm Charlotte Taylor. I'm a career coach and resume writer in Central Florida, about halfway between Tampa and Orlando. I love helping people, stand out in their job search, get noticed, and get hired. That's the name of the game. This is a brutal job market. We're seeing longer time to hire. We're seeing this kind of low hire, low fire environment where people are job hugging. Companies, aren't letting, people go. There are layoffs. I should cage that with there are layoffs, but in general, it's kind of a stagnant environment where there are more job seekers than there are jobs available. So that's why it is super important that you strategically differentiate yourself so that you can stand out from others. And my one tip would be don't use a one size fits all resume. A generic resume that's it's optimized for no one. Every application should be a targeted resume that gleans information from the job description and then showcases the relevant accomplishments. It's not enough to show what you did. You've got to show how you made a difference. And I'll pass the mic to Alan.
Thanks, Charla. Hi, everybody. I'm Alan Kirshner, excuse me, career coach from New Jersey. I help people with job search strategies, interview prep, LinkedIn profile optimization, salary negotiation. And I mirror what Charla and Melanie are saying. It's been a challenging job market, with the jobs report and things like that too. But the key really, I would say, is to be focused, to put the time and effort into doing things. And I guess a couple of things that are, getting in your way, one, beside the challenging job market, it could be that you, the strategy that you're using isn't necessarily being effective. So it's a very challenging market when you're doing your job search strictly just on applying to things online. There could be 100 or a couple of hundred people that are applying. So how do you differentiate yourself and how do you stand out amongst that many people? So that's one thing. And I think, it's important, like Charlotte was saying, that you really need to be able to differentiate yourself, show why you make a difference. And one of the things, another thing is the resume could be something that's getting in your way. So it's really important to show your accomplishments. It's not just what did you do that were your job responsibilities, but how did you make an impact? And the more you can quantify that and show a potential employer how you can solve their pain points, how you increased revenue, how you reduced cost, how you made things more efficient. That's really key, because they're looking to, they have issues and things that they need to get resolved. So you want to show how you're the answer to that. And it's important to be different and a differentiator. So I think that those are some critical points.
Thank you, Alan and Charla. And for those that don't know who I am, and we have a great audience listening in, it looks like we have about 25 people so far. So we truly appreciate that. Just want to give a shout out. We've got a lot of introductions happening here as well. So as I was saying, for those who don't know who I am, my name is Melanie Mitchell Wexler. I am an executive career coach as well as a LinkedIn strategist. I agree with both everything Charla and Alan said. And one tip that I would give really quickly is I would also reiterate one thing too, is like really look at your LinkedIn profile as well. That's the other thing that I would really encourage you to do. LinkedIn is turned on 24/7. I know a lot of you might have already heard me say this from time to time, but it should also be doing some of the heavy lifting for you. It's a chicken and an egg. Which comes first, your LinkedIn profile or your resume? Well, sometimes either one can. So that's the other thing too, is that it could be helping you be found in a lot of different ways than you may not realize. And so definitely don't forget about your LinkedIn profile if anything. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But let's just kind of start at the beginning. And of course, guys, if anybody has any questions, feel free to just drop it in the chat. I've got the chat open, and so I am paying attention to that. So hopefully I won't miss any questions, but definitely feel free to drop any questions you have, even if it's not on the topic we're talking about right then. And we'll get started, and we'll make sure we cover those questions as best as possible. But let's just talk about the elephant in the room, because I've gone through two different recessions when I was recruiting. I recruited for over 20 years. I saw two different types of recessions, and there are different types of different types of economies, different types of markets. I personally feel like we've seen this job market have different iterations. I don't know. This is the job market that's changed. It seems to continuously change. We don't have like 6-month periods of like consistency. And so I think that's a big part of where we're seeing a lot of discomfort. But my question for both Charla and Alan, and Alan, I'll start with you and then go to Charla. What is your advice in terms of a difficult job market? Because we know that the numbers that came in for last month's job report here in the US in particular were stagnant. So basically no job growth, but we're also, and as Charla mentioned, not having a lot, hiring is slowing. So what, in your opinion, Alan, do people do? How do you navigate this market today?
I think a big piece of it is the hidden job market, or networking to find jobs that aren't advertised out there. So I think that's really a critical thing. Your network, typically is going to be the way that, I don't know, 80% or so of people are landing positions. So I think it's important to let people in your network know that you're out there, what you're looking for, what you bring to the table, and to develop your network. So that's a big piece of the benefit of LinkedIn, beside what Melanie's already mentioned. It's important to grow your network on LinkedIn. So I think it's really critical and helpful to do that. It's also important to get out there in person and try to attend in-person meetings, whether it's trade associations, job seeker support groups, or anywhere where you can get out there and talk to people and be with people in person. Because job hunting, can be very lonely, especially if you're just doing it in front of your computer all day. So I think it's important to be out there and to keep growing the network and do the things that other people are not doing. A lot of people will just hit the easy apply or apply to things online. So you don't want to be doing that. You want to be more creative. You want to, really get your name out there. Another benefit to LinkedIn too is to publish content, to get known as a subject matter expert. And so people will find you too. So like Melanie was saying before, LinkedIn is open, 24/7. It's not like your resume that you just send out. LinkedIn, people can find you any time of the day or night. So I think it's important to be using LinkedIn efficiently and effectively. And, you have to have a good, robust profile that accentuates who you are. And it's going to be a bit different than what the resume is. You have a lot more real estate there too, and you can personalize it much more. So I think it's important that you differentiate your LinkedIn profile from your resume. But it's all those things. It's a marathon more than a sprint. So you need to be involved in doing a number of those different things. I'm involved in a job seeker support group, and we meet on Fridays. So this past Friday, 2 of our members had landed positions, which, was great. And so it's nice, one, that we do the meetings in person so people can actually get up there and tell their story about how they landed. And also it gives people encouragement that are in the job market to see that, yeah, people are landing. So in both of these cases, there was a component of networking, but in both of the cases, they saw jobs that were posted online. So, we keep espousing the benefits of doing networking. But in this situation, 2 of the people that landed were applying to things online. So you really have to explore a bunch of different options, but you don't want to spend all your time just applying to things online, because that's typically not the way it's going to happen. But here you go. There's 2 situations where it did happen. So that's something to think about also.
That's great. And we should definitely cover, guys, too, about because I think all 3 of us are in agreement with we've all seen successes with applying online. So applications online are not dead. We do have 2 other questions, but I'm going to, Charlotte, I'm going to start with you on the original question in terms of like, what are your thoughts in terms of navigating this tough market? Because I think, and I want to reiterate something too, like, a job support search group is amazing, because it's a great go to look for people that are in the market right now. And that may sound weird to you guys, but it really isn't, because it's a great place to get resources. It's a great place to get referrals, find out what other people are doing that maybe you haven't done. So Charlotte, what are your thoughts on a tough job market?
Yeah, I just wrote an article. I encourage you to go to my website, writtenbyapro.com, and click on the blog. It's called 2 Countries, 1 Question, Where are the Jobs? And it's helpful to know what that time to hire is. And in this article, I took the jobs report from both countries because I was curious to see what the difference was, and averaged out what they were saying was the average time to hire. Some industries hire much faster than others. So that's a good thing to know. Another thing that you can do is to be aware what the economic outlook is. Is that a dying sector of the economy? Is it a growing sector of the economy? Those are things that will help you kind of get into the flow of this is what to expect, rather than being discouraged that it's taking so long. It's not you. Um, hiring managers, we've got to put ourselves in their shoes. They're asking 4 questions. Can this person do the job? Will they do the job? Are they going to be an asset to my team? Are they going to be a liability to me as the hiring manager? And so what they're looking for when they check your LinkedIn profile is to verify fit and to get a feel for who you are as a person. They want to see, is there a clear career story here? Does it show progression, consistency, logical moves? All of these things are read as reliability. So you don't have to say, you're a hardworking, reliable, results-oriented team player. you demonstrate those things through your accomplishments. Any unexplained gaps or chaotic jumps create friction. So I'm starting to see with my younger candidates who, it's okay, you're starting out in an internship. Those are internships, they're going to be short term assignments. But then when your first 3 jobs, you're not there longer than 8 or 9 months, that's going to cause some questions. So, you want to be really clear about the progression, and you want to be consistent in, I know it's fun to try a lot of different things, but that we've got to weave it together to create a common thread of using certain strengths in different capacities.
Absolutely. And we're going to get to all of your questions. I'm just going to go down the row here, but I just want to reiterate something. What Charlotte and both Alan said. The reality is this: hiring is still happening. It just may not be happening fast. And I know that's frustrating. But this is a different job market. And I've gone through 2 different recessions. So I've seen, and I've actually worked in the US. I worked in the best market that we've ever seen many years ago. I jokingly say there's a reason for that. It was because we didn't have a whole lot of regulations on the housing industry and other markets. So we're not going to get back to those levels. But the reality is this: it is very real that if you are being selected, know that even when looking at the resume, a rejection can happen because the people you're competing against are all on the same level. If you get to the interview stage, most likely the person on your left and the person on the right of you, sort of speaking there, as if you were in the same room, but they're going to have the same qualifications as you. So you have to be able to show up with what I call a differentiating factor. It's not enough to say, hey, I did X, Y, and Z. Alan mentioned this earlier. You really have to show the how you do something. Why is it worth hiring you over the person sitting next to you? And you have to drill down on this answer. You have to do that. That is what's going to make you stand out in today's market. And people will be hired in slow markets. It will be a lot longer churn process, though, and you've got to be prepared for that. Charlotte, I'm going to start with you, and then I'll add my insights here too. Travis had a question for us. How much AI is in the application process? Are all ATS systems AI? Should I have 2 resumes, one for ATS and one that is attached to send out to recruiter? I can attack the ATS side if you want to talk about having a dual resume, and what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are, if you have a very strong primary resume, customizing it for a particular position shouldn't take you more than 10 or 15 minutes. What you want to look for when you're doing that is compare your resume with the job description. Determine what are the top 5 to 7 most relevant skills that company is looking for that specific role. Look at the order of your accomplishments. Are they, fairly similar? Are you putting what they think is the most important thing at the top of your accomplishments? You can kind of cut and paste a little bit, to put it in the order that they want to see it. Your experience isn't going to change that much. Where you really want to focus your attention is in the summary statement and in the skills that you list, so that you make sure you're giving a value statement that resonates. And your resume has one job: to get you the interview. It's not to tell your whole life story. So every word must serve a purpose. You only have 2 pages to be able to make that connection. And so there's a term, a literary term, that you write for your audience. And that's true in a resume. You want to be able to write for the reader, and the reader to see at a glance who you are and the value that you bring. I think the resume could be the same, whether it's going to the recruiter or the hiring manager. In my opinion, what needs to change is the cover letter, because you want to make that personal connection with the hiring manager. And my clients are getting hired by doing that extra step. They're applying online through the proper channels, the company website, and then they're finding out who that hiring manager is, sending them a personal letter saying, I applied online through the company website, but I wanted to express to you personally how interested I am in this opportunity because I bring these 3 strengths, to the role. That way, you're approaching it from both ends. The talent acquisition person will have it, and the hiring manager can request to see any resume. I kind of switch back and forth depending on the company if I'm familiar with them. Not the smaller companies usually will let you attach your resume in an email and it'll go through just fine. Some of the larger companies have firewalls built in. It will stop the attachments from going through. So that's why it's important to, start that conversation. If the hiring manager isn't active on LinkedIn, use a program like mailscoop.io or Voila Norbert, or there's another one, hunter.com. There's several different Hunters spelled a different way, but what you're after is the one that gives you the email address for that person. All you need to know is their first name and their last name and the company that they work for, and it will give you a likelihood of about 98% accuracy on finding that person's email address at that company. So I hope that answered your question. The other nuance would be, what kind of recruiter are you talking about? If you're talking about sending your resume to a recruiter at an executive search firm, you want to tell them different things. You want them to be able to know the types of roles you're looking for, your geographic preference, your salary range. Those are things that you would not put in a company letter. But if a recruiter is going to be forwarding your resume, they need to make sure that you're a good fit. And I'm sure Melanie has more to say about that, what recruiters expect to see. But the short answer to that whole long ramble is, if you've got a good primary resume, it should not take you but 10 or 15 minutes to customize just the top section with the headline, the summary, and the skills, and then a quick look at the accomplishments, your most recent accomplishments, to make sure that you're addressing those.
And we got several questions, and I have to say thank you, Charlotte, because I actually was going to ask you. By the way, Charlotte is our resident in what I call career coaching Google. And so I actually needed the Mail Scoop IO because I was working with a couple of clients, and I had Hunter, and there was another one I didn't like, but I actually like Mail Scoop, and that was the one I couldn't find. And so I was like, I need to ask Charla. We need an app called Ask Charla. Ask Charla your career questions. But we did get a lot of questions. We will make sure that we drop that in the chat, those resources as well, so everybody has them. We can also answer how to utilize those, and where to employ emails and things of that nature, because that is. I'm going to add this. And then Travis, I'm going to answer your question about ATS as fast as I can as well. We have to be aggressive in our job searches, folks. And I'm not saying aggressive in a bad way. I'm saying you have to be your best job search advocate. Nobody else can. Nobody else can. Not a recruiter, not the hiring manager. Nobody else but you has to be your best job search advocate. So do not feel that, oh my gosh, well, I don't want to bother them, or what will they think? What's the worst thing they're going to say? I mean, the reality is but then we also have to say, how are we approaching people? What are we saying? How is this coming off? We have to be consciously aware of the messaging that we're sending, because that's going to be important. That's what leaves a good impression versus a bad impression. And to your second question there, Travis, in terms of, are all ATSs AI? So here's the reality. There's a lot of misinformation about ATS systems out there. Do they employ AI techniques? Yes, some of them do, but not all of them. And I say that because those are added additions, like high level AI things they have to be purchased. They're added bells and whistles. ATS systems, honestly, are not the evil enemy that people want everybody to believe. And they've got every single job seeker. And this is where I get frustrated. I have literally worked in probably 10 ATS systems in my career. Haven't used one recently. And you may say, well, then how do you know? I have a very extensive network of recruiters that I'm attached to. I am very attached to a lot of recruiters to this day. I see the back ends of systems, and I can tell you that the recruiting department is the last to ever be invested in. These systems are very expensive, and so companies aren't paying to upgrade these systems so you can have an extra bells and whistles. At the end of the day, recruiters are still going through resumes. They are still reviewing resumes. So please make sure your resume is reader friendly. And don't forget, a hiring manager is not attached to an ATS system. And where I find that people are getting they're getting off is we're so focused on keywords. I have to have all the keywords. You're never going to have all the keywords. Keywords are just some basic words that I'm going to use as a recruiter to help narrow down my search. Because remember, as a job, my job isn't as a recruiter to help land that candidate. The job of a recruiter is to find the best candidate for that role. That is the job of a recruiter. My goal, if I have a funnel, I'm going to go to the very bottom of that funnel in the very beginning, because it doesn't make sense or use of my time if I start at the top and narrow down. I want to go to the very bottom, and then I'll start to go up. So I'll filter that. I'll go to the very bottom filter of every keyword that I want, but it's usually the main system. Usually some keywords that are in the job description itself that are absolute requirements. I would say that if you are not, don't worry so much about, is this ATS friendly, all these other things. Focus on the quality of the information in the resume. That's what's going to get noticed. That's what's going to get read. Your resume then is going to go to a hiring manager. Hiring manager has nothing to do with an ATS system, by the way. They are the ones that are reviewing and actually looking at your resume. So recruiters actually spend, I know this will sound frustrating, but they actually spend very less time. I mean, if you go into my yes pile and I have just a few, I'm picking up the phone and calling you, and we're going to review some of the qualifications, and I'm going to hear how you sound. So yes, it is important. Don't get me wrong. I spend a lot of my time working on resumes by all means, but don't fear the ATS system. Focus on the quality of the resume. Alan, Jay had a quick question, and I've got some thoughts here too that I can add, but I want to come back over to you. Jay's question was, when a candidate applies for positions, the employer requires the candidate to create an account. Why is this? Candidates should be able to apply without having to create an account. It's just very time consuming. Thoughts or comment to Jay's question? And we've got more questions too, so.
Yeah, I would say, Jay, that, they're trying to create a database of candidates, so they want to get information about you. And I guess it's a way of them linking that. So I'm not sure that there's anything so devious or anything about that. Anytime we go into any website these days, you have to create an account and set up a password, which is annoying because I've got umpteen thousand passwords and emails, which, I don't remember. And then I'm trying not to use the same one for everything. So yeah, I get that frustration, having to open up additional accounts and things, but I think they're just trying to have a database where they're collecting things. And then that would be a way of them contacting you, probably easier as well too.
Yeah, and I mean the application process, understand too, the application process is different. I'm going to just speak to the US. In the US, there are HR laws. You have to have an application on file for every single candidate. Those applications are actually kept separate from recruiters. Recruiters do not, especially for larger companies. Now, if it's a smaller company where HR may be hiring, things of that nature, but applications are kept completely separate. A recruiter actually never sees those applications. So all the questions they ask, those are just questions that are actually required by law. You have to have a documented process of where the person came in from. You have to have any application you keep, even back in the day in paper, but even electronically, are required to have that documentation kept on file for, it's like 6 to 10 or something odd years. And so you have to have all of that documentation, which is just part of it's just part of the documentation process. Angela had another question. Charlotte, I'm just going to ping pong between you guys. I'd like to ask, when the profile is aligned with the resume and it says it's a fit, but yet you receive a rejection, any thoughts, like in terms of when we get those auto rejections, or I can add some from the recruiter perspective, what's likely happening, but how do we make sure, let me frame this question for you, Charlotte. How would you make sure that we how is our resume aligned with the job description? Let's go with that.
Yeah, I have a system called the value framework. And I also have a blog post about that on my website if you want to go and look at it. But it stands for verify the need, align your qualifications, lead with results, have unique differentiation, and show enthusiasm and fit. So you really want to pay attention to the real pain points that the company is experiencing, and then show how your strengths align with the company needs. Don't make them do the math. Be very specific in your qualifications. Not, I have strong project management experience, but I've led cross-functional projects with budgets up to $2 million across engineering, marketing, and sales. That gives me some context around what you do. Anyone can claim they have project management experience. If you have global experience, be sure and add that in. Always lead with the results first, share the outcome first, then the business impact, and then the actions that you took. So you want to go from strategic to tactical when you're describing, or what some people call front loading your accomplishments. Achieved X by doing Y, which resulted in Z. And then sometimes I'll actually start with the Z, the results, and put that at the start of the bullet point, so that it draws attention. Okay, so let me give you an example off the top of my head. I was working with a human resources director, and one of her bullet points said that she led an initiative that resulted in retention improving from improved employee retention 87% to 94%. Those kinds of, over whatever 6 months time period. So you want to show what you did, and then you want to explain how you did it. If you don't have room for the how, you want to at least give a little, I don't know if teaser is the right word, but just give a little inkling, which, resulted in, $2 million in additional recurring revenue. Because there was a direct correlation between the retention and the revenue. If that was the case for her, I don't remember exactly how we worded her bullet point. And then unique differentiation. What can you do that others can't? Do you have that rare combination of technical and business startup and also working, for a Fortune 500 company. Maybe that's your edge. For senior roles, you want to show, your leadership philosophy, how, you can influence across the organization, so it's more strategy, less operational, and how you can lead change. Um, and then you want to be very specific in your cover letter about how you understand where the company is right now. Um, Maybe your expansion into the EMEA market is exactly the kind of challenge that I've done twice. And it's why I sought out this role. Something like that connects your strengths with the employer's needs. That's kind of a cover letter thing, not a resume thing. So you want to show that value. I hope that makes sense. If I bungled the explanation, I have a blog post that tells about it more in detail, and you can also use that in an interview situation. I hope that answered the question.
No, perfect. And you can always listen back to the replay as well.
No. I won't do it.
Well, somebody might want to listen back to the replay, but and also to answer your just a question in general, like sometimes you may get an auto rejection, and I know that can feel frustrating as well. And I want to acknowledge, sometimes what happens with that is that the job may still be posted on the company website. They may have internal regulations that it has to be posted for a period of time. They may already have a slate of candidates that are already in line that they've identified, even if it's still posted and it's still out there. And so what may happen is as they're reviewing incoming applications for jobs, that's when they go in and send out the rejection notices. That's one of the reasons, even if you are perfectly aligned. The other thing that I would just add is that understand too that like job sites like Indeed, for example, do what we call scraping the internet. And so one thing you have to remember is like what the purpose is that job boards in general. LinkedIn doesn't do this really as much. It's very minimal on LinkedIn, but Indeed does. They go and search the internet and they scrape the internet for new job postings based on, whatever applicants people are doing searches on. Remember, Indeed's in there for business. And so what happens is they'll put job postings up that could still very well be active, or you could apply on the website, but are probably been like older job postings. The whole goal is that they want traffic to their website. That's the goal. So those aren't paying clients. Some of them are on Indeed, for example, but not all of them. And so that's what, Indeed's process is set up, because its job is to sell its services and say to companies, look at how many job seekers we have. Here's how many are looking for these tech-based jobs. So sometimes jobs on Indeed in particular, I'm not just picking on Indeed, this happens across the board with all job boards. I'm just more familiar with Indeed's process. And so you have to know that some of the jobs that are out there are a little bit older. And so that can also happen while it may be the first time you've seen it. They could be very well into the interview process. Alan, we have a question from Aaron. We love all these questions, guys. So we're at 6:41. So we'll make sure that we're going to stop at the top of the hour, but we're going to keep on going. So we have a great night. We have about 36 people listening in, it sounds like. So we love it. But Erin had a question. Should she address the work gap coming from not being able to find a job on her CV or LinkedIn profile? Alan, what do you say for Erin?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say, first off, how long is the work gap? I think that would kind of determine the way I would answer it too. But I think it's probably, in my opinion, it's a little bit easier to address it on the LinkedIn, I think, because you have more space that you could put something in there. On the resume, I think it would be a little bit harder to put that in. But Erin, you're definitely going to need to be able to explain it when, you go in and talk to somebody on an interview, or, for either a screening or when you talk to the hiring manager. So you definitely want to have something to explain what the situation is. And, I would say it used to be more of a stigma in the past, with the gap, but, I would say with COVID and post-COVID, it's not as much of an issue. And, there's a lot of transitions going on. So I think part of what's important is to talk about what you were doing during that time away. And, it's certainly, if you were taking care of a medical issue for yourself or a family, or, raising a family, those are all valid and legitimate reasons why you were out of the workforce. And I think it would also be helpful, based on kind of piggybacking on what Charlotte was saying, that I think that could be addressed probably even better in a cover letter, where you can talk a little bit more about that. But I would say I wouldn't tend to try to put it in the resume. I would think it's a little bit better to put it in the cover letter, and you could put it in the LinkedIn profile also, but try to show if you were doing other things that might help get you back into the workforce, where you were volunteering, and you could show some of the skills that you were getting with that. If you were taking some training or certifications or classes, and you could show that as well too. So I think if you can show some of those things also, if you had the time and the ability to do those would be helpful too. But so I guess I would say not in the resume. You can put it in the LinkedIn profile, and certainly in the cover letter. It would be a good area to explain that.
Perfect. And Charlotte, well, I'm going to answer Manpreet. So why do we see so many jobs reposting after months while closed with still a high number of applications? So when you see, I'm just going to use my own experience as a recruiter. So when you see a job reposted after a few months, and I forget the exact percentage, I'm horrible with like numbers, but it's somewhere between 30 to 40% of individuals that will have accepted a job that either will not start in a job or did not last within the first 30, maybe 60, even 90 days probationary period. So sometimes you'll see jobs that are all of a sudden reappearing very quickly. A lot of times people accept job offers. They end up not accepting them because they've got another job offer that they've decided to take, or whatever. They got a counter offer and they decided to stay. And from a job search standpoint, yes, recruiters then are going to go back to the ATS system. They're going to find the candidates that are available. Now, we're probably going to start seeing more availability, but in some cases, and even in the recent months, there's a lot of competition for top talent, and some of those candidates, those quote unquote applications, are not always immediately available or interested in the job anymore. So you do have to start fresh from a search. Also, remember too, if you're on LinkedIn, the number of applications you're seeing is not true applications. It's views of the job. So if you send me the same job, Manpreet, and say, hey, could you review this? And I click on it, it considers that quote unquote a application. So it's not the app, it's not people actually applying. So that number is skewed. Again, LinkedIn is in business. LinkedIn is looking to sell its services. So do not get caught up in the number of applications. Now, I will say this. If you're not landing an interview, we have to be very discerning with the jobs we're applying for now. What was probably, in my opinion, you could probably be in the 70th percentile, 70 to 75 of requirements. I would say you have to be at least minimum 85% to 90%, checking those boxes. That's how competitive this market is right now. And so it's very important to understand that I will tell you that less than probably 10% of anybody that applies for most jobs, most of the applications you receive are not qualified for the job they've applied for. And I can speak to firsthand experience with that. 90% of what recruiters walk away with, usually about and I'm probably being generous. If I had recruiters on here, they'd probably tell me it's even less, but probably anywhere between, let's just say, 5% of the number of applicants are actually qualified. Now you may be saying, but I'm qualified. Here's where the problem also comes in, is because there's so many in terms of the funnel that it takes longer to sift through. And so this is, job seeking is a new nuance. It's not, there's not an exact science in how we handle this. And so we're dealing with a global remote world right now in some cases for positions. So don't get caught up in the number of applications. Focus on your, what I'll call your race. Look to see what percentage of this do I match. And if it's a high percentage, then yes, we should apply for the job. If it's not, if you're not 75% at least, then do not apply for that job. Don't apply with the thought that, oh, well, they're going to see my resume and maybe they'll think of me. No, apply, be very discerning in the application process. Charlotte, John.
Yeah, I've got a quick tip to add.
Yes, please go ahead.
I have a hack. If you want to DM me, I'll send you it. It is how to apply within the first 24 to 48 hours of a posting, because response rates drop sharply after that first wave of applicants. And that's sometimes why you'll see a job posting come and go, is if they're sifting through, they've gotten so many applications, they just put it on pause. And then if they don't get a qualified candidate, then they'll turn it back on again. And what it is you can go in and use a Boolean search and change those hours into seconds at the end of that search string. And you can actually put that in to your LinkedIn search and come up with job postings by your industry and your job title within the last 48 hours. Or you can even narrow it down. I want to see job postings that have happened within the last 2 hours or the last 4 hours. All you have to do is change the number at the end of that search string. And after this is over with, I'll put that search string into the Career Coaches on Call group chat so that you can see it. So that's one thing that you can do to try to be one of the first to apply. Sometimes, that's helpful. That's a little trick. And then the other thing is to search on job postings rather than searching by a person's name. So you can put in a Boolean search to find, oftentimes a hiring manager will say, I'm hiring for a certain kind of role and building my team. Sometimes you can search for hiring or building my team and then put in your job title or your industry, and you search on posts, you're going to come up with the most recent job postings. That's also a good way. You can also search for finding a company that's growing. You can just type in, we're growing, we're expanding our team, and then put your parameters of your industry or your job title in there. Another good way, if you want to work for a startup, you can say, search on posts for, we're excited to share we raised Series A funding or whatever, Series B funding. When you're searching on posts, you can usually pick up on ones that are, your feed usually gives you the most recent ones. And so those are ways that you can use a Boolean search inside of LinkedIn to find opportunities by searching on posts or by searching for a time frame and applying to jobs that are posted within 24, 48 hours.
And I just want to say that Charlotte just got so uber technical on Alan and I, and Charlotte would tell you she's the least technical of all of us here. I'm loving it. I'm loving it.
I put it all into a course that I've broken out from my main course. It's called the Targeted Networkers Playbook. And I put all of these search strings and tips and tricks to try to be at the, at the top to, get in that first wave of that applicant pool. And so that is a self-paced course that you can take in your own time. Happy to tell you more about it.
Perfect. And I'm also going to encourage all of you, especially if you're first time listening, please, if you are not already connected with us, please reach out. Please send us a connection request. If you can't send it with a note, not a problem. Most likely we'll know that you, if you can't, don't worry about it. We'll most likely figure out that was through this, especially if it's in this kind of time frame as well. So we are approaching the 7 o'clock hour. We still have a ton of questions, but Charlotte, I'm going to go to one question with John, and then I'm going to try to power us through a couple of quick questions that I think I can answer fairly quickly. And then we'll wrap it up for this evening because that hour went by quickly. So last main question, if we did not get to your questions, please feel free to message us. Also, I'm going to give a shout out to Meryl, who is in the audience, and connect with Meryl if you want in on the career. We have a private group DM chat on LinkedIn. We try to offer support, coaching tips, advice, direction. I'll share, for example, like, my weekly newsletter or, resources that we come across. But if you're not a part of that and you do want to be a part of it, just message Meryl and he'll make sure that you're taken care of. Meryl, thank you so much. I thank you in advance because I did not tell you I was going to say that. But Charlie, question from John. What are the most important elements that should be in alignment with between your resume and your LinkedIn profile? As we're tailoring resumes to specific job descriptions, are there components of your LinkedIn profile that should also be updated? And I think Carolyn Hildebrand, Carolyn, I will also make sure I get your question as well, but I think your question was in line with what John's question was too. So Charlotte, thoughts on that? Oh, did I lose you, Charlotte?
Okay, I'm sorry.
There you
It would
are.
help if I turned the mute button off. Huh? Your resume's primary job is to get you the interview. Your LinkedIn primary job is to build that human connection. So you want to really pay attention to telling your career narrative in a more casual tone of voice. It's a different writing strategy from your resume. So don't cut and paste your resume into the experience section. You want to write in a first person point of view. So in LinkedIn, it's okay to use I and my. Just don't do it to excess. Some little trick that will help you is that you can say, in this role as senior project manager, comma, I, and then put a colon. And then you can use bullet points underneath that complete that sentence so that you don't have every sentence starting with, I did this and then I did that. So you can be strategic about the way you use the personal pronouns. Basically, the resume shows your credentials and your accomplishments. The LinkedIn profile is going to build on that credibility and paint you as a human person who's approachable, someone who is a compelling candidate. I just got to pick up the phone and call this person because they're the right fit. So you're focusing on fit, and you can pretty much take 5 or 7 job descriptions, look at all of them, run them through AI if you want to, and say, what are the top 5 to 7 most important skills for this type of role? And then those are the kinds of things that you want to make sure you address in your LinkedIn profile. I hope that answers your question.
I think you did it perfectly. And I'm going to do some quick fire answers to a couple of people. There's a lot of questions about AI systems. Lewis mentioned he uses Gemini and how would your resume score with the ATS. I would tell you this, don't rely on that as an accurate piece because a lot of ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, remember these are systems are set up to respond to you in a way that and like gives you the exact answer. So they're not 100% like impartial per se, and they don't necessarily always look at things. We think they're looking at it very black and white, and that's not always the case. The other thing is that different systems use different methods. It's not necessarily, and truthfully, even if you have a low score, if you've applied for a job and if I'm reviewing resumes that day and I'm just going through them, if it's, I come in the next day and there's only 10, I'm not even looking at a score. I mean, that's just a ranking. And usually you are, I'm not going to go to somebody that has like quote unquote a 1 star. If it's a star ranking, sometimes they're percentiles, because obviously that shows me that there's probably not enough content in that resume that align with what I'm looking for. So that's not a smart use of my time. So don't necessarily rely on that. I know there's some questions here too about LinkedIn's AI and the matching the job. Again, these are very arbitrary. I am not a big fan of LinkedIn's AI tools. I think that, sorry, LinkedIn gods, I have to say it. I think they are behind the curve in the tools that are out there. I do use tools. I use them as research. I use them as helping with like, sometimes with like how can I edit this sentence so that it fits onto one line if I have a hanging orphan word, or I have no other words that I'm like I've reused the same word too many times, and I found that I've done that. Help me, give me some different ideas if I need some inspiration, things like that. I don't use it to write the resume. I use it to help, like, oh, how should this be edited? Or, what's like this formatting's off. How can I get it correct? So I use it for more technical purposes. And what I would tell you is that LinkedIn's AI tools do not tend to be at the highest level right now. So again, remember from the back end is they want you to click on the jobs. Why? Because when you click on the job, that's data that they go back to company A and B and C and say, hey, look at how many job seekers we have. This is why we want to charge you to pay for LinkedIn, to post your jobs on LinkedIn. That's the purpose of, that's the purpose of a job board, is it drives business, it drives revenue. And I'm, call me the realist, the hardcore, I call it like it is, but that is the purpose. So we have to imagine AI tools are telling us, yes, we want you, job seeker, to click on this. Why? Because that's a statistic in our favor. So human discernment, look at it. And that is where you can use an AI tool and say, here's a job description. What are the skills that I am missing? And what are the skills that I have? And have it compare. Now, comparison, it does a good job in that aspect of things. So we had a lot more questions, which we just did not get to. But I want to give Alan and Charlotte some time. I know I'm over a few minutes, but Alan, I'm going to start with you and then go over to Charlotte. Let everybody know how to find you and connect with you, and any closing thoughts for this evening.
Yeah, thanks. Another great session. The best way to get in touch with me or reach me is through LinkedIn. You can send a connection request like Melanie was saying. And, if you have the ability to put a personal note in there, that's great. If you don't, then usually it won't be an issue either, seeing that you've been on the call. And I would say, it's a challenging job market, but people are landing things. So you have to stay the course, put in the effort, explore all the different avenues that we talked about. And, part of it, there's a little bit of luck involved with job search also. It's being at the right place at the right time. So that you can't control, but the more effort that you put into it productively, and that doesn't mean just applying to hundreds of jobs online, but to do the things that we've discussed a lot tonight, that's going to be the way that you're going to land. And everybody lands. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. So thanks again to my coaches for a great session.
Thank you. And I once had a manager, Alan, that told me when I first started recruiting, everybody has a home. And so that was the goal, is if you can't find if you're struggling to find a candidate a job, everyone has a home, and that your job's to go out there and find it. So Charla, closing thoughts and where people can find you.
Yeah. My closing thought would be that this job market rewards people who are very specific about what they want. They're visible in their space, and they're willing to have real conversations. And while we see a marginal success rate with people applying online, it is typically the slowest route to a job. So your next job is one conversation away. How do you start that conversation? With the changes in the LinkedIn functionality, comments are rewarded highly. Comments that are thoughtful, that add to the conversation, that share insights or resources, those are going to get you noticed. If you have someone who is active on LinkedIn that you want to meet, start by commenting on their posts, and not just great posts or wonderful insights. LinkedIn is now rewarding comments that are 15 words or more. So you want to think about what you're going to say in that comment. It's not a chance for self-promotion per se, but it is a chance to get into those industry conversations. Some of the best places to have those conversations are in professional associations that have groups on LinkedIn, or by following influencers in your industry and commenting about what's going on in the industry. I have had clients who have gotten hired based on their comments. Yes, they had to submit a resume. Yes, they had to go through interview, but they knew that they wanted to interview that person because of his thought leadership in his space. So I encourage you not to be shy about commenting. If you're interested in the Targeted Networkers Playbook, I'd love to talk with you about it. I really put some thought into trying to make sure I provided AI tools to help you find companies quickly, to help companies notice you quickly, with keeping AI in mind. AI is part of the job search. It's not going to go away. It's how you harness it as a tool to help you get to where you want to be. And if you're interested, you can always connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to talk with you. I think Alan has a free consultation. So does Melanie. We all do. If you just have that burning question that we didn't answer tonight, set up a time on one of our calendars, and we'd be happy to talk with you.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to add, because, I'm a big mindset person. Surround yourself with, doesn't have to be with, your head in the sand, but, get out, do some exercise, take a little bit of a walk, get some fresh air. Make sure that you're surrounding yourselves with, positive influences. It's easy to go down a road of negativity when the job market is struggling this hard. And it's easy, especially when you've been in the market for so long and you feel frustrated. If anybody's heard my story before, I've been there. I've walked that walk personally back in 2017. The biggest thing that I did for myself, and the game changer for me, was I turned my mindset around in terms of how I was approaching my job search. So make sure you're doing that. Make sure you're protecting your mindset, because your mindset and confidence is actually your superpower. That is what's going to propel you from not feeling like you're hitting your momentum to success. So definitely just continue to do that. And we appreciate everybody. Normally we do this on the second Tuesday of the month. We had to push it back this month, but we'll be back on schedule for next month. And please connect with us, and we'd love to have you back next month. And we'll continue to talk about the LinkedIn piece, because we had a lot of LinkedIn questions tonight. So anyways, hope everyone has an amazing evening, and thank you for joining us. Good
Yeah.
night.